So our the name of our talk today is the power and freedom of responding, not reacting. So I have to start with a question, because we have to be real here. They're already laughing. So how many of you have never had a moment in your life where you said something you regretted or done something you regretted? How many of you have never had a moment in your life where you said or done something you've regretted? Please, you might as well go home or go off Zoom, because this is what being human is, right? It's part of being human. Welcome to being human. So there are two parts to being human. There's a part of us that consciously engages with the world around us through thought, through intention, and through reflection. And there's also a part of us that engages without thought, without intention, and without reflection. Well, let's just say that's the part of us that reacts to things. So let's call these two parts of being human the conscious self, consciously considering and responding to events in our life, or the reactive self. But we know both of these selves. We're familiar with them because they're both part of who everyone is. Unless you're really something extraordinary. Or, very spiritually advanced, which is not me. Baseball player Wayne Boggs, who is known for his wisdom about living a positive and authentic life, shares the following. He says, our life is not determined by what happens to us, but how we react to what happens. Not by what life brings to us, but the attitude we bring to life. So let's take a moment and look at the definitions of these two, of react and respond. So at first, when we examine these words, they seem to have similar meaning. And my thesaurus indicates that each is a synonym for the other. But each word offers a very different response reaction to life's experiences. Responding, or respond, is a spin-off from the word responsibility. And it is considerate and it is deliberate. Reacting, on the other hand, or react, literally means to meet one action with another action. It is immediate and sometimes rash. Through evolution, humans have become hardwired to react to what we might deem as a threat. And for much of human existence, we had no time to ponder before taking action. For in that amount of time, our ancestors might have been eaten by an animal or killed by another clan. Our reptilian brains have been wired for survival. We know that. And in that we are familiar with fight, flight, and freeze. Those are instinctual responses that increased our chances of making it to another day, historically. But those same instinctive responses in modern day situations do not necessarily create a positive effect. Actually, they may cause the opposite. They may cause suffering in our lives and in the lives of others. The things we might deem as a threat to our life might be a threat to our ego, or something we take as a personal offense, or our career, or our money, or our political affiliation. We might deem that as a threat. Over the last 3 weeks, or several weeks, a month, I guess now, we've discussed the horrors of war, and we've felt the dream of peace with Peace Pilgrim. And we closed last week's service about Peace Pilgrim with the words, go in peace and be the peace you want to see in the world. But how do we do that? And that is quite a directive. I mean, I have some nerve saying that to everyone, to go in peace and be in peace in the world. What a hard thing to ask people to do and be. How do we inspire ourselves to really, really be that, to embody that? This week, we're going to explore that. We're going to explore just this. And I'd like to start by sharing a Buddhist parable that may offer us inspiration as to how we might be that peace. So one day, the Buddha was sitting under a tree with his disciples when a person he had never met before approached him. And he walked up to the Buddha, stood before him, and spit in his face. The Buddha slowly wiped it off and paused for a very long moment. And he asked the man, "What do you want to say next?" In a very calm way. The man became puzzled because he did not expect that question. In the past, when he had insulted people, they always reacted with anger. But the Buddha did not. The Buddha's disciples, though, became angry. And Ananda, if you've heard the story of the Buddha, Ananda was his main disciple. He said, "This is too much. We cannot tolerate it. That man must be punished. Otherwise, everyone will start behaving that way." The Buddha said to his disciples, "He has not offended me, but you are offending me," he said to his disciples, "because he is new. He is a stranger. He must have heard from people something about me. He must have heard that I am an atheist, a dangerous man, a revolutionary, a corrupter. And he may have formed some idea or a notion of me. He has not spit on me. He has spit on his own idea. I am not a part of it. And I can see that this poor man must have something else to say. I am not part of it, yes. Spitting is a way of saying something. And that is why I am asking him that question. I am more offended by all of you because you know me and you have lived for years with me and still you react." This man who spit on the Buddha became even more puzzled and confused. He went home and he could not sleep a wink all night. He was haunted by the experience that he could not explain it to himself what had happened. The Buddha's behavior shattered his whole mind and his whole pattern and his whole past. The next morning, the man returned to the Buddha and he threw himself at the Buddha's feet. And the Buddha again said to him, "What is next? What else do you want to say? Again, your actions are saying something that cannot be said ordinarily." And the man looked at the Buddha and said, "Forgive me for what I did yesterday." And the Buddha said, "Forgive?" He said, "Every man is like the Ganges River. We go on flowing. We are never the same. We are different from day to day, like the clouds. We look at life like the clouds, they change. I cannot forgive you, for I hold no grudge against you. I cannot forgive you, for I hold no grudge against you. I am not the man who sat here yesterday before you, and you are not the man who spit on me." That's the end of the parable. There's a lot of lessons. There's a lot to think about in this parable, right? And I like it for that reason. I like multi-complex parables that give us food for thought. The first teaching I noticed three teachings in this. The first I noticed is when the Buddha clearly paused between that assault on him, let's say, before he responded to the man, because he did, in that pause, he didn't react. He had time to respond. There is no space for choice when we react. We're not choosing, we're reacting when we react. This is my takeaway on this. It's not conscious. There's no space for that. And when we react, there's also little space for heart. Right? We're not coming from here. We're reacting. It brings to mind the quote I've shared in many services with all of you, and you probably know what's coming. It brings to mind the quote I've shared by Dr. Viktor Frankel. And this is the full quote, unedited. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. If we could take that space between stimulus and response, and we could fill that space with a moment, just a moment of thought and of feeling, it's actually an invitation to open-heartedness. And in that space, we can make a choice. Mind you, I don't know if everyone knows who Viktor Frankel is, but Viktor Frankel was a Holocaust survivor, and he was a psychologist, or I don't know what was the specific term at that time for it, and he survived the camps, lost his family, and wrote an amazing book called Man's Search for Meaning. And gosh, if Viktor Frankel can suggest to us to not to react, what a teaching is that from such a source, to consider it. I often paraphrase his teaching that I shared before. And this is how I remember it, because I feel like it's easier for me to remember. And I often say, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our power and our freedom. That's my simple reminder of it. And in my life, I have to say, there is no quote that's impacted me more than this one. To literally change your interactive life with other people and also change your inside experience. It's absolutely brilliant. So the second teaching in the Buddhist parable is the perspective that we are ever changing, that we are not one way. I often hear people say, some people are just evil, or they're just bad. Some people are just bad. Now I'll leave us all to create our own assumptions and perspectives about life. That's ours to choose. But the invitation here is that we are ever changing, and that we are ever evolving, and who we were yesterday may not be who we are today or tomorrow. And we can invite ourselves in this to constantly change and grow. And we could also invite ourselves to see the growth and possibly the humanity in other people where we might have decided we can't see their humanity. It could be an invitation to see the peace in the other person, to see that there's something there, like the Buddha did in this man. And what I think is, as I was thinking about this, for example, one of the things we do as a liberal, religious, and social justice-oriented congregation and community is we advocate for incarceration reform, right? Very passionate for most of us. And if there's a story attached to people that are incarcerated, that they are bad or evil and are eternally a criminal per se and cannot be reformed, we cannot live in that story and also advocate for incarceration reform. If we don't believe that people can be different, we're not in alignment with our work. You know, what's the words of Saint Francis of Assisi? You know, our talking and walking are not in alignment, because I think we have to invite ourselves, or I would suggest we invite ourselves to see the fact that people can change and that people are not exclusively one or the other. Sometimes it's just easy to bucket people, you know. It feels easy to say good or bad, or kind or unkind. There's just so many sides to being human. So if we want to embody that consciousness, that people that we have to consider the Ganges River, and that people are eternally changing. And this is what the Peace Pilgrim did in her teaching to us about how do we work towards peace in the world. She saw the good in all of humanity, no matter what. And that is what the Buddha is suggesting here too. And in both cases, it's also an invitation to make a new choice, to have a new response, or to consider a new perspective to what we might have originally reacted to. And the final teaching I saw in this parable is a teaching about forgiveness. The Buddha said, "I cannot forgive you, for I hold no judge against you, no judgment against you." If there's no judgment, there's nothing to forgive. It's not an easy place to choose not to judge, but it could start in having that pause when something happens to us, and having something in our minds that might say, this person or this was not intentionally maybe against us. It's the suggestion is those 3 steps: the pause, to consider something differently about someone, and then, and only then, would you be able to consider not holding a grudge or forgiving. Tough stuff, but really interesting to consider. So as we move towards the end of this service today, I'd like to invite us to consider times in our past when, if we had paused before reacting, might we have had a different result? And in hindsight, would this result be something we would have preferred? Could we have had something that a better result in something with another person? In Oprah Winfrey, I love Oprah Winfrey. She says, when we know better, we do better. So as we contemplate building the muscle of responding rather than reacting in our lives, we could practice it. We could do it by imagining ourselves in the future, pausing. That might be a way to build that muscle. Like a creative visualization. You know, people in sports, God bless you. People in sports, they imagine themselves hitting a home run enough times so that when they get to bat, they hit a home run. So if we can imagine ourselves really making a little bit of a spiritual practice, taking a pause and choosing something different, or just pausing before we respond, it could be a very interesting effect in our lives. So I invite you to consider that. Sometimes we don't know the scars in other human beings. We don't know why other people do what they do. And if our hearts open just a little bit, perhaps we can see that challenge in them, and we can respond with peace and with presence. Try it. and let me know about it. Send me an email. You all have my number. You all have my email address. You can text me, knock on my door. However you want me to support you or want to just talk about it with me. It worked, didn't work. And I'll try it myself and I'll share it with you. Let us take this piece we examined today into our lives. And through our lives and through our hearts, let us take it out into the world. May it be so.
If you like this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.